So, the very first stuff we did is just graphing the inequalities. Don't get that confused with what we did here on this assignment. The stuff we just did has an X and a Y in it. It's not the actual, these are just equation or inequalities. So if we were graphing this equation like we just did, it would be on the graph like this, crossing the x-axis at 5, and x is less than, so we shade it this way. Again, if we just graph the inequalities, which this will be at the end of the test doing these. If it's the equations like that, this crosses the y-axis at 2, dotted line, and it's shaded above because y is greater. But what we started off right away was just graphing the solutions to this, which is on a number line. And the number line is on the test for you, so you just got to fill in the circle and the line. So x is less than 5. All you got to do is put a couple numbers on each side, fill it in. X is less than, so it's everything to the left. Okay, so you see the difference between the two types of graphs? So this one, again, it can be any letter, is a hollow circle because it's not equal to, and it goes to the right. So these have already been solved. You don't have to do anything. So some of them you have to solve the inequality and then graph it. Okay, so they're simple ones to solve. All you got to do is, see, these are already solved. They already got the letter by themselves. These you just got to get the letter by itself. So since it's a minus, you add 5. X is greater than or equal to 7. And then you got to graph the solution just like up here. So that's a filled in circle at 7. X is greater, so it's everything to the right of 7. All you got to do here is subtract 6. B is greater than negative 4. Remember, the negative numbers go backwards. That would be a hollow circle. B is greater, so it's everything to the right. This one, it's negative 6 times A, so you got to divide by negative 6. And when you divide by negative, remember you got to switch the direction of the sign. In anything with inequalities, you got to do that, no matter what kind of stuff you're doing. So negative over negative is positive 7. So this would be the graph of that. Okay, if you have $100 to spend and you want to buy t-shirts, there's a few of these problems similar to this where you have to write an inequality that represents the amount of t-shirts you could buy. So all it is $15 times every t-shirt. You can use any letter you want. Can't be over 100, so it's less than or equal to 100. So then you just got to solve it. Divide by 15. .6 repeating. So, what's the most t-shirts you could buy? 6. Okay, the ones you gotta write are not any harder than that. I didn't do one, but I suppose I should. If you've got a two-step, okay, same thing as an equation. You get the x by itself, so get rid of the 8, so you subtract 8. You get negative 4x less than or equal to 4. Divide by negative 4. So when you divide by negative, switch the direction of the sign. So then to graph that, that'd be a filled in circle at negative 1. X is greater, so it's to the right. Then we had the compound inequalities. Okay, they can be written all in one like this, or they could be written separately like that. If it's written all as one, all you got to do is get the x by itself in the middle. So you do the same thing. You got to get rid of the plus 2 first by minusing 2. It's just you got to do it to the other both sides. So that'd be 6 is less than 2x is less than 10. Then divide everything by 2 to get rid of that 2. 3 is less than x is less than 5. So the graph, it's going to be between 3 and 5. They're both hollow circles. X is less than 5, so it's going this way. X is greater than 3, so it's going to the right of 3. So they connect like that. Sometimes they'll have different signs here, so make sure you watch for that. Sometimes one will just have the less than, sometimes less than or equal. If it was like that, that one would be filled in, this one would not. If it's written separately, whether it's an or or an and, you just solve each one. Minus 2. Divide by 4, x is greater than 2, or it could be this one, add 3, x is less than negative 2. So you just got to put these two numbers on. Now remember, negative 2 is to the left of positive 2, so you got to put negative 2 there. They do both have hollow circles. X is greater than 2, so it's to the right of 2. X is less than negative 2, so it's the left of negative 2. So then this gets us to the absolute values. So remember this, absolute value has two solutions. The absolute easiest, some of these are equations, some of these are inequalities, but they're both solved the same way. This would be the easiest. You don't have to solve anything. X equals 3 or negative 3. Because you could put 3 in there and it'd equal 3, negative 3 would equal 3. The way you set these up is you rewrite it, you put the same sign on the other side, and then you put the opposite number on the other side. That one, just once you do that, you're done because the X is by itself. You don't have to write it that way, but that's one way. You could just list 3, negative 3. If it's like this, then you got to solve it because the x isn't by itself. So you just put the same thing the way it is, put the same sign over here, put the opposite over there, and then get the x by itself. Here you didn't have to move anything because the x was by itself. So all you got to do is add 5, add 5, add 5, and you get -1 equals x equals 11. They both work because 11 minus 5 is 6. -1 take away 5 is -6, but the absolute value changes it.
No. At least Hannah helped me solve it after you twisted the corner. She took it apart and put it together and fixed it for me.
Okay? If it has the absolute value, before you can rewrite it like this, you've got to get this absolute value by itself. So you've got to get this -3 out of there. So all you do is add 3 to get rid of it. And you get 2x plus 5 equals 19. So now that the absolute value is by itself, just put the same sign here, put the opposite over here, and then solve it. So subtract 5 to get rid of the plus 5. Then divide by 2 to get rid of the 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2. And you get your two answers. -12 equals x equals 7. Okay? If it's an inequality, you don't do anything different. If it's an inequality, you just write it down, put the same sign over here, and then solve it. It's exactly the same, it's just the signs are different. The only thing you got to watch for is if you ever divide by a negative, you're going to end up switching the directions of the signs. So if this would have been a greater than equal to problem, it's solved exactly the same way. It's just it's not equal to it. It's got the greater than or equal to signs in there. Nothing different. Then that gets us to sketching the graphs like we did on this last assignment. So when you're sketching graphs, that's the one where you don't do a number line, and it does have the graphs on there for you. This crosses the x-axis at 1, and it's a dotted line. So then you got to shade one side or the other. X is greater, so it's everything to the right. If it's a y, it's going to cross the y-axis at -2. This has the equal, so it's a solid line. Y is less than, so that's everything below it. Then we get the ones where you got a graph where it's not in slope-intercept form yet, but you just got to get the y by itself so you can graph it like those. So you move the 2x over. It would just change from positive to -2x, and then there's a plus 12 there. Divide everything by 6. You don't need to reduce it. It's just the graph can be smaller if you do. -2 over 6 is -1/3 x. 12 over 6 is 2. So this cross is at 2 with a slope of negative 1/3. So you, from that point, you go down 1 over 3. It is a dotted line. And then you got to shade one side or the other. Since y is greater, you shade above it. That's it. There's none that are really tricky at all on it. They're all pretty basic.